Hey guys, tonight we set sail into the ink-black Pacific, where the stars look close enough to dip your fingers in, and the ocean breathes like something alive beneath your feet. There's no engine, no radar, no glowing screen with a blinking arrow showing where you are. Just a carved canoe stitched by hand from wood and twine, and a navigator with the sky tucked behind his eyes. You're not just on a boat, you're sitting inside a centuries-old question: how did they do it? The air is thick with salt. The hull creaks like an old joint. Somewhere out there beyond the shimmer of the moonlight is land. But you won't see it for days, maybe weeks. Still, you know it's there, because you're a Polynesian wayfinder, and this is what you do. You don't hope to arrive. You remember your way home like you remember a lullaby. The stars shift overhead, not quickly, but you notice. You're trained to. The Southern Cross dips a little, a signal that you've nudged slightly off course. You lean your weight into the outrigger's edge. Just a little correction. It's not science, the way textbooks put it, but it's not guessing either. It's knowing. You probably won't survive this. At least not if you're one of the European captains who laughed at oral navigation or thought a compass was the only true friend on a voyage. Because here, out in this fluid highway with no signs, your only map is the memory etched into your blood. And if you forget it, you become a dot on the ocean's ever-growing story of lost men and driftwood. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and what time you're listening. I love seeing where you're all drifting off from, whether it's 3 a.m. in Minneapolis or just past sunset in Cebu. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The canoe rocks gently as your eyes adjust to the dark. You're not alone. There's a crew here, barefoot, quiet, moving with the grace of those who know. They don't control the sea. They collaborate with it. One adjusts the sail made of woven pandanus leaves. Another scans the horizon. No one speaks unless needed. The rhythm is the communication. There's a word for this kind of voyage, Moana. It doesn't just mean ocean, it means everything. It's the space between where you are and where you'll become. It's vast, yes, but it's not empty, never empty. The Pacific is a continent of knowledge, hidden in motion. Your guide tonight, let's call him Kaulani, was trained not in schoolrooms, but in starlight. From the age of 7, he sat beside elders who made him listen more than look. When a bird flew overhead, they didn't point. They asked, where is it going? What time did it arrive? What does it mean? He learned silence first, then sound, then sea. The boat isn't fast, not like a motorboat slicing waves, but it's efficient. Double-hulled canoes glide, not crash. They're built to skim rather than batter. The wind is your friend, unless you misread it. Kaulani stands near the bow. His eyes aren't on the water, they're on the sky. You follow his gaze. There, above the swaying mast, is a belt of stars, Orion, but not the way you know him. To the Polynesians, he's Ka-Hehe, o Nalani, the line of heaven, and he points, not at constellations, but at directions. He has once spoken a star compass of 2 divisions. Mainstream history tells you that these canoes journeyed thousands of miles, from Samoa to Hawaii, Tahiti to Rapa Nui, long before the magnetic compass was even invented. And somehow they arrived. Not once, routinely, with passengers, with pigs, with breadfruit trees lashed in tight bundles to the deck. Now here's your quirky tidbit. They didn't just carry supplies, they carried spirits. Ancestors were consulted before departure. Offerings were made. Some crews believed the souls of voyagers past whispered from the waves, tugging their canoe back on course with invisible hands. And hey, if you've ever tried to parallel park while someone whispers instructions from the passenger seat, you know it's not always helpful. But historians still argue whether these early voyages were intentional or accidental. Some claim the settlers of Hawaii drifted north by mistake. Others insist it was as deliberate as tying your shoelaces. The truth? Probably somewhere in between. What we know for sure is this: they came, they stayed, and they did it again. Back in the boat, you press a hand against the warm wood. It hums almost. The ocean is calm tonight, but it's always changing. The swell tells a story, a long, slow pulse that reveals what's beyond the horizon. Kaulani feels it through his feet. You're trying to too. Give it time. You'll learn that this isn't navigation. It's intimacy with the world, with memory, with uncertainty. Tomorrow you'll learn how the ocean talks in waves. But tonight, just listen. You wake to soft paddling sounds and the gentle rustle of woven sails catching the morning breeze. Your body aches a little, not from hardship, but from stillness. Overnight, the canoe has moved miles, but you wouldn't know unless you watched the stars shift like a slow-motion compass needle. Kaulani is already awake, crouched low at the bow, sipping something from a gourd. He nods toward the ocean, not in warning, but in greeting. Today you start to understand that these weren't random drifters or reckless explorers. These were wayfinders. That word matters. A wayfinder doesn't wander. A wayfinder remembers, recognizes, and reroutes. You glance at Kaulani again, and it's like watching someone read a book without pages' eyes, scanning invisible text written in windlight and wave. Wayfinding was never just a skill, it was a role, a title, a burden, and a privilege. Only the most disciplined were trained. Not everyone on a canoe needed to know the stars, but someone had to. And if they failed, everyone paid the price. No pressure. Imagine being in charge of leading 20 people and 2 pigs across 2,500 miles of open sea, using only what your grandfather taught you in rhyming couplets. It's not exactly Google Maps, but somehow it worked. The mainstream historical fact: Polynesian wayfinding traditions developed over centuries and allowed seafarers to intentionally settle the largest navigable ocean on Earth, long before Europeans even dared to leave sight of land. At its height, the Polynesian Triangle stretched from New Zealand in the southwest to Hawaii in the north and Rapa Nui, Easter Island, in the southeast. That's a triangle of water bigger than Europe, charted without metal paper or magnetism. And here's the wild tidbit. Some wayfinders practiced a technique where they'd lie flat in the canoe, close their eyes, and feel the motion of the boat across the waves. Not metaphorically, literally feel. They'd track tiny shifts in swell direction by how their bones vibrated. That's not a joke. That's not even romantic. That's real. Kaulani's grandfather used to say, "The sea has muscles. You just have to listen to them flex." Your job tonight: start tuning your senses, sight sure, but also skin, tongue, ear. Every sense is a compass if you train it enough. You notice how Kaulani glances at the horizon, not searching, confirming, like he already knows what's there. You follow his line of sight and spot a faint line, a band where the ocean darkens ever so slightly. That's a swell boundary. It's where waves from different weather systems meet and braid. That intersection tells Kaulani something. It's like finding a traffic circle in the middle of the ocean. He points, not at the sky, but at the water. "We're on the nape of the warrior," he says softly, as if the ocean might hear and change its mind. You learn that wave systems have names like street corners. Each one has a rhythm, a tempo, a tone. That name, Nape of the Warrior, refers to a specific swell pattern that forms between 2 distant islands after a seasonal storm. It's not on any paper chart, but it lives in Kaulani's mind, like an old friend's laugh. You're starting to see that these journeys weren't navigated by a single piece of information. They were a web of signs. If one clue faded, another stepped up. If the stars disappeared behind cloud, the wave patterns would still sing. If the waves went flat, the birds would speak. If the birds vanished, the scent of the wind would whisper a hint. Historians still argue whether these methods were more intuitive or structured. Some anthropologists claim it was pattern recognition honed by repetition, while others believe in a more mystical transmission of knowledge, what some call ancestral memory. You're not here to decide. You're here to learn what it feels like. You touch the side of the canoe again. It doesn't feel like wood anymore. It feels like commitment. Kalani begins humming. It's not a song you know. The melody loops, rises, then settles. You realize it's not just music, it's data. The song encodes directions, wave rhythms, and star names. In this culture, oral tradition isn't quaint, it's functional. Some chants are long enough to take 3 days to sing completely. Miss a line and you might miss an island. Your favorite quirky realization of the night Polynesians didn't name constellations, they named paths. While Greeks pointed to shapes in the sky, wayfinders pointed to where those shapes moved. They didn't just see Orion, they watched where he rose, how he arced, and when he disappeared. Stars weren't decoration, they were employees, each one with a specific role on the night shift. There's a phrase Kaulani says often, the sky is honest, but you have to ask it the right questions. You smile. It's not lost on you that in a world obsessed with external navigation apps, satellites, even glowing car dashboards, there's something radical about closing your eyes, feeling the ocean's sway, and knowing exactly where you are. The sun is higher now, painting the water with flecks of gold. You're not sure how far you've gone, but you're starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, you're not lost at all. By now, your feet have begun to read the ocean. Not fluently, more like you're in a beginner's language class and just learned how to say hello and where's the bathroom. But still the connection is forming. You stand on the canoe's lashings and close your eyes. Beneath you, the waves roll in rhythmic threes, soft, soft lift. That's not random. That's telling you something. Kaulani calls it the Heye Nalu, Uhane, the spirit swell, the one that flows deepest. It's not the tallest or the fastest, but it's the one that always shows up. Kind of like your one emotionally stable friend who brings snacks to the group meltdown. He shows you how to spot it not just by feel, but by how the horizon bends slightly, like it's tilting its head. The swell curves under the boat, coming from a storm hundreds of miles away, one you never saw and never will, but it's still steering you like a ghost hand. Now, here's the mainstream historical fact that floors people the first time they hear it. Polynesians could identify and memorize up to 8 simultaneous swell directions. 8. Not "it's choppy today," not "we're going north." No, 8 separate movements of water intersecting beneath them like an underwater subway system, each one tracked and interpreted like some kind of soggy stock market. You try to focus, but your body, unused to this kind of mental GPS, is overwhelmed. Your stomach gurgles in protest. Kaulani just grins. That's how you know you're learning. This is when he starts talking about the difference between Palapala, what's written, and Ike, what's known. Western history clings to the first. Polynesian navigation, like many indigenous systems, leans on the second. And yeah, it's unnerving, because Ike is slippery. It lives in memory and breath and practice. You can't copy and paste it. You can only pass it down. Quirky fact time, some wayfinders trained their apprentices by throwing them into the ocean with nothing but a gourd and a paddle, forcing them to find their way back, using only the feeling of the swells. Harsh, maybe. Effective, absolutely. You're not getting thrown in yet. But Kalani does toss you a piece of dried breadfruit. Chew slowly, he says. The ocean hates a rushed stomach. Now, here's where the real Jedi mind trick begins. The swell system is so ingrained in experienced navigators that they can sail hundreds of miles without ever looking up. Their sense of direction is internalized. And that's not metaphor, that's neurological adaptation. Some studies even suggest their brain patterns light up in the same regions used by echolocation in bats. You didn't think this would involve bat-brain powers, did you? Surprise? The canoe keeps moving. It's mid-morning now. A light breeze flutters the sail, and you realize something odd. No one's correcting course. There's no drama, no frantic scanning, just trust. That trust is built on wave memory. If you were to stop the boat right now and float in silence, Kaulani could still tell you where you are based on how the swells lean into the hull. Historians still argue whether this ability was consciously trained or culturally absorbed. Some say wayfinders were taught from infancy to associate swell changes with location. Others believe it's more mystical, part inherited sensitivity, part oceanic intuition passed through bloodlines. But either way, they agree on this. It worked. As you start walking back toward the stern, you notice a second layer of motion beneath the waves. A cross-swell thinner, shorter. Kaulani calls it Moana Pai, a side ripple from an old volcanic island far behind you. It's a reminder. You're never just moving forward, you're always being nudged by where you came from. You sit near a bundle of supplies, banana leaves wrapped around taro, paste clay pots lashed with coconut fiber. There's a rhythm to everything. Eat, steer, rest, scan, feel, listen. Navigation isn't a task, it's a state of being. You're not directing the canoe, you are the canoe. And here comes your fringe tidbit of the day. Some navigators claim they can feel the voice of the sea in their dreams. They'll dream of a direction, a current, even a storm. Whether you believe that or not, you can't deny the commitment. These weren't sailors, they were sea psychics, wave whisperers, and they never let a horizon go unexplored. The wind shifts slightly. Kaulani lifts his chin. Time to adjust. You help him pull on a length of cordage and the sail angles just a hair to the left. The canoe responds immediately, like it was waiting for permission. You stare at the water amazed. It's like steering a thought instead of a machine. And that's the last thought you cling to as you sit back, body swaying gently in tune with the sea in this world. The elements aren't obstacles, they're instructions. You don't conquer the ocean, you collaborate. Afternoon now. The sun hangs like a molten coin in the middle of the sky, and the ocean, ever theatrical, flips from silvery blue to a dazzling sun-stung glare. You squint, you sweat. You swear your earlobes are sweating, but Kaulani doesn't even blink. He's still steering, not with ropes or wheels, but with weight. He shifts a little, leans his shoulder, nudges his knee. The boat responds. This is the lesson of the day. Stars might rule the night, but by day the waves become the only map that matters. You're introduced to the concept of the star compass, but not in the way you would expect. Because despite the name, it's not a physical object. It's a mental diagram, a floating circle in the navigator's head, divided into 32 directional houses. Each house contains the rising and setting points of specific stars. At night, the navigator aligns the canoe by watching where these stars pop up or vanish. But during daylight, they pivot. Because now, without stars to help you, rely on the swells and the sun's path, plus some real-time cloud gossip. More on that later. The historical fact that makes this section a showstopper: Polynesian navigators trained their minds to operate like live GPS systems. They didn't need tools because their bodies were the tools. Eyes like sextants, bones as level gauges, minds full of moving geometry. Kaulani explains it while sketching in the air with a stick of charred driftwood. Imagine a clock, he says, pointing to the horizon. Star A rises at 3 o'clock. Star B at 5. Star C dies at 9. You're always somewhere inside that spinning wheel. He pauses. But the trick is, you never see the compass. You feel it, right? No pressure. And now your fringe tidbit: some of the most advanced navigators could mentally rotate the entire star compass as the canoe shifted headings, while sitting in a moving vessel, with no reference points. Think of it like solving a Rubik's Cube blindfolded on a trampoline. You notice how the canoe seems to know where it's going, even when no one is actively steering. That's not a flaw, that's by design. The double-hulled structure tracks like a train stable and predictable, which lets the navigator feel the most delicate shifts. This is sailing by whisper. You ask Kaulani how he memorized all the star names. He smiles. They have personalities. They're not just points of light. They're co-workers. He tells you of Hoku'ula, the red star, a faithful early riser, and Na Kuhikuhi Okakai, the pointers of the sea. You start to think of them not just as stars, but as co-workers you'd invite to a potluck. Very punctual co-workers. But here's where it gets better. The star compass isn't just for navigation. It's used for teaching. The directions become stories. Whole genealogies are mapped onto cardinal points. Your ancestors came from the east, and so the east is where your memory sits. The stars aren't fixed. They're inherited, passed down like family names. Historians still argue whether these teaching systems qualify as formal science. Some say yes, they're structured, empirical, and highly repeatable. Others insist the cultural and spiritual layers blur the definition. Either way, the accuracy is undeniable. You lie back against a woven mat near the stern and stare at the sky. Even in full daylight, the stars are up there, invisible, but remembered. And that's the point. This whole system works because of faith, not the abstract floaty kind, but the kind built from 1,000 consistent nights. Kaulani points suddenly not up, but to the horizon. There, you squint. Nothing? He waits. Then you see it, a dark smudge, low and wide, like someone smudged ink just above the waterline. It's a cloud, but not like the puffy, cheerful ones you draw in a kindergarten sketch. This one is layered, flat-bottomed, and oddly stationary. That, Kaulani says, is an island you can't see yet. Wait, what? He explains certain types of cumulus clouds gather over islands because of rising warm air. They sit there day after day, reflecting the presence of land. And even if the island itself is too far to see, its cloud hat gives it away. Like a shy celebrity behind sunglasses. This is your new favorite trick, reading clouds as topography. They tell you what's beneath them, even if the island's still 30 miles out. You imagine sailing thousands of miles without knowing what you'll find, only to recognize a low-hanging cloud and know there's land beneath it. You sip some lukewarm coconut water from a gourd and try to imagine what it would feel like after weeks at sea to see that cloud, to know your gamble paid off, that you were right, that you weren't drifting, you were aiming. And that's when you realize this journey isn't about exploration. It's about confirmation, a kind of deep remembering. You already know the island exists. Your job is just to prove yourself worthy of arriving. As the sun begins to drop again, you feel the heat loosen its grip. A cooler wind picks up. The canoe, gently angled, keeps its pace. You're one quadrant into the invisible star compass, with 3 more to go. But you don't feel lost. You feel aligned. The ocean is still huge, still wild, still whispering secrets, but now you're starting to understand the language. The light softens. Golden hour out here on the open Pacific is less romantic sunset and more the sky has decided to melt into honey and spill across everything. You sit near the bow, now toes grazing the wood, as the canoe glides forward like it knows how to fly, if only barely. Kaulani is crouched again, but this time he's watching the sky, not for stars, but for birds. Time to look up, he murmurs and listen. You thought wayfinding was all about stars and waves, but here's the next piece of the puzzle: birds, specifically seabirds. They're not just pretty or annoying or poetic. They are directional markers with feathers and fish breath, and they've been guiding navigators longer than some of our calendars have been around. There it is, your mainstream historical fact. Polynesian navigators studied the habits of seabirds, like terns, noyo, frigate birds, aiwa, and boobies. These birds have consistent flight paths depending on time of day, feeding patterns, and nesting grounds. A flock of terns in the morning, heading out to fish. That same flock in the evening heading back to land. No compass needed. A single bird overhead doesn't mean much, but 2 or 3 circling then darting in the same direction. That's basically an arrow with wings. Kalani points to a pair of noyo, slicing diagonally across the bow. 2 hours that way, he says. Land, small, not our stop. You watch the birds disappear into the glow. How did he know it wasn't your stop? He shrugs. Too low, too fast. No nesting pause. And here's your quirky tidbit for the night. Some wayfinders could identify individual birds, not just species, but actual birds, by their wing patterns and calls. That's right. Polynesian GPS sometimes came with personality recognition. Kalani swears his grandfather had a name for one particularly cranky tern, who always flew in from the same angle and pooped on the mast. As the breeze picks up, you notice how the entire world seems to narrow into clues. A certain slant of wind, a fish jumping west, the smell of damp feathers. It's not magic, but it is close. Historians still argue whether the bird observations were purely ecological science or if they carried deeper cultural, spiritual meanings. Some believe these birds were seen as literal messengers of the gods. Others argue it was pragmatic biology passed through generations of practical trial and error. Most likely both. Kaulani tells you how young navigators had to spend weeks memorizing bird silhouettes at different times of day, in different light conditions, with and without cloud cover. If the birds lead you home, he says, you have to know their moods. You start to understand that this is a discipline of intimacy with the sea, with the sky, with creatures that don't even know you're following them. Later you spot a frigate bird, a long-winged creature with a snake-like tail hovering effortlessly, without ever flapping. Kaulani watches silently. Long-range scout, he whispers. That one's going to an island we can't reach this week. The bird wheels, then disappears. It's humbling, isn't it? Realizing that someone else, some soft-bellied, beady-eyed creature, is better at locating your next destination than any high-end GPS app. And that this culture embraced that truth instead of resisting it. You ask Kaulani how this knowledge gets passed on. Stories, he says, but not bedtime ones. Riddle songs, puzzles, tests. You don't memorize facts, you inherit questions. And then you have to find the answers at sea. You think back to your own schooling, flashcards, grades, cramming for tests. Here you learn by watching the sky blink, the birds dive, the clouds hover. Your classroom has no walls. Your textbooks fly, and they don't wait for you to catch up. The sun is nearly gone now. The birds have vanished from sight, already roosting somewhere green and warm, but their trails linger in your mind, like vapor, like ghost roads only you can see now. You lean back and let the quiet settle. The canoe creaks. A gourd clinks. Somewhere a paddle shifts, setting off a soft splash that echoes longer than seems possible. For the first time since you left shore, you sense that land exists beyond the curve of the world. Because now you know how to look. Night returns as it always does, soft-footed and vast. The ocean's surface mirrors the sky so perfectly, you start to lose track of which way is up. Stars blink above and below, and the canoe drifting across liquid starlight feels like it's floating through space. Kaulani settles beside you, his voice low. Tonight, the sky tells us everything. This is when you really meet the stars, not as metaphors or twinkling decorations, but as co-workers on the overnight shift. The core of Polynesian celestial navigation lies in the star compass, not the physical kind, but the one built into the navigator's memory. You've heard about it. Tonight you watch it in motion. Kaulani raises his hand and begins pointing slowly, deliberately. That's Hokupa, he says. Polaris. It stays still, our anchor. Over there is Hokulea, rising in the east, faithful as always. Lawelo sets in the west, but not until the sky is tired. You stare at the constellations, surprised at how quickly they move when you're watching closely. Each one arcs from horizon to horizon, its path forming a lane of travel, like little highways in the sky. Mainstream history confirms what you're seeing. The star compass divides the horizon into 32 directional houses. Each star has a designated rising and setting point. When one disappears, another takes its place. This allows the navigator to leapfrog across the night sky, constantly checking their heading without needing any instruments. But here's your fringe tidbit. Polynesian wayfinders didn't memorize star charts, they sang them. Chants encoded the names, angles, and timings of the stars. These chants were rhythmic, layered, hypnotic. The song would guide the memory, and the memory would guide the canoe. Kaulani begins humming one now. It's low, almost a vibration. You can't understand the words, but you feel the structure of it. It's the shape of remembering. There's a long pause. Then he says, "Stars don't lie, but they don't shout either." You have to be ready to listen. You're not entirely sure what he means, but the longer you sit, the more the stars begin to fall into patterns. You see it Orion's belt, or Kahehe o Nalani as Kaulani calls it, slicing the sky, marking the transition between seasons. The Pleiades cluster Makali'i rising higher now, an ancient signal of the Hawaiian New Year. You're watching time unfold in glowing dots. Historians still argue whether the star compass system qualifies as a navigation tool in the Western sense, or something more akin to a spiritual framework. Some scholars claim it's a blending of astronomy and theology science sung through myth. Others insist it's pure observation, stripped of dogma. Kaulani doesn't care what they call it. He just knows it works. You glance at the sail, now taut, catching a breeze. Kaulani predicted an hour ago by how low Jupiter sat on the horizon. You're learning to trust the subtleties. But here's something that might surprise you. Even with all this cosmic precision, wayfinding is flexible. Navigators adapt. When clouds hide the sky, they switch to wave reading. When swells conflict, they look to birds. When all else fails, they wait. Tonight, though, everything is clear. Kaulani stands legs steady despite the constant motion. We're heading for Lanai. Still far, but it's ahead. You don't see anything, just water and stars. But you don't doubt him, and that's new. You lie back again, letting the canoe cradle your weight. The sky is wide, full of messengers. Some flicker softly, others blaze like they're trying to tell you secrets before dawn. Each one is part of a system older than countries. The canoe keeps cutting through the dark silent except for the hush of water along its edge. There's no motor, no ticking clock, just presence, awareness, stars that rise and stars that fall, and the quiet knowledge of where you are because you've watched them do it before. Somewhere deep in your mind, a pattern is forming, and it feels like coming home. Morning arrives without ceremony, no trumpet of birdsong, no cinematic lens flare, just a gradual rinsing of the sky, one soft breath at a time. The stars wink out shy of the sun. The air smells different now, less briny, more earthy, as if the ocean is whispering, land is near. But Kaulani doesn't look to the horizon. He looks at the water. Time to read color, he says, crouching low. Today you learn about one of the most delicate and underappreciated tools in the Polynesian navigation toolkit, the color of the sea. That's right. This section's star isn't a planet bird or wave, it's light. The ocean, like a moody teenager, changes appearance constantly. But to a trained navigator, those changes aren't random, they're information. Deep water reflects the sky and appears dark blue. Shallow water over coral reefs becomes turquoise or even greenish. Sandbanks, especially in sunlight, brighten the water to pale, nearly white hues. It's a language painted in gradients. Your mainstream historical fact navigators across the Pacific could recognize specific islands by the water's color alone, long before any coastline came into view. Combined with wave behavior and cloud shadows, these color cues formed a dynamic visual map of the ocean's floor from the surface. You and Kaulani kneel together, eyes scanning the horizon where the ocean shifts from velvet blue to something lighter, murkier. Reef there, he says, shallow, maybe a mile out. You try to see what he sees, but at first it's just water. Then you spot it, a pale patch barely perceptible glowing from beneath. It's not a reflection, it's a revelation. Here's your quirky tidbit. Certain Polynesian elders were known to paint miniature ocean gradients on banana leaves to teach young navigators how to recognize underwater topography. These weren't casual doodles, they were color-coded memory tools. Think of them as the world's first aquamarine flashcards. Kaulani dips a woven basket into the sea, scooping up water. He lets the sunlight hit it, tilting it like a jeweler appraising a stone. See that tinge, he asks. Too green. Not open sea. He dumps it and moves on. The canoe glides forward now in shallower swells. You notice the boat moves differently here. There's less push, more lift. The sound of the water changes too, less slap, more hiss. Even without seeing land, you feel it under the hull. Historians still argue whether this ability to read ocean color came from inherited knowledge or sheer repetition. Some believe it was passed down in stories about the green skirts of the islands. Others claim it came from lifelong exposure, the way farmers can read the clouds or musicians feel pitch. The conclusion, probably both. You lean over the side of the canoe, squinting into the depths. Shadows flicker, sandfish. You're not sure, but there's movement down there, life. You can sense the seabed getting closer. The ocean is thinning, and with it, a strange sense of anticipation builds. Don't expect to see land first, Kaulani says. Feel it, and then it hits you. The wind has changed, not in speed, but in scent. There's something floral, faint but real. You sniff again. Not salt, not seaweed. Something sweet, taro, leaves, gardenia, you don't know. But your stomach tightens like it's remembering something from another life. The closer you get to land, the more clues appear. You spot birds again, this time circling, not moving across the sea, just spinning lazily in place, dipping down now and then. That's nesting behavior. That means land. You don't cheer, you don't shout, because this isn't the first time Kaulani's done this. It's probably his 1000th, and besides joy, here is quiet. It arrives like mist, suddenly and without drama. You sit still as the canoe presses forward. The colors beneath deepen again, teal, then jade. Your own pulse slows. For a moment, you forget what it was like to be afraid of the ocean, or lost in it, because now it's familiar. Kaulani points one last time, not at the water, not at the sky, but at the horizon. There, faint as breath, is a line of green. Home, he says. You can't see the shoreline yet, but that doesn't matter. You saw the signs. You listened. You followed the color. It's quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes when everyone on board knows you're close. Not guesses, knows. The crew shifts their weight instinctively, checking lashings, adjusting sails, not because they need to, but because that's what you do before landfall. You honor the journey by preparing for its end. Kaulani isn't watching the water now. He's watching the clouds. You squint up, thinking maybe he's just daydreaming. But no, he's reading. You're about to learn how Polynesians read the sky, not just for stars, but for cloud architecture. That's right. Today's lesson is about how clouds gossip about islands. The main historical fact: certain cloud types, particularly low-lying cumulus clouds, often form and linger over islands due to the rising heat from the land. The result, a flat-bottomed, slightly domed cloud that hovers steadily in one place, sometimes for hours. To the trained eye, it's not a cloud. It's a land indicator. Kaulani calls them Na'au Halana, the resting clouds. You spot one just ahead. It doesn't move like the others, it just floats parked over a part of the sea that seems denser, greener. It's the sky saying, hey, there's something down there. Now here's your quirky tidbit. Some wayfinders believed that islands had sky shadows, reflections of their spirit or essence that appeared in the clouds. They didn't just read them meteorologically, they read them metaphysically. The cloud was the island in another form. And historians, they're still debating this one. Some call it superstition. Others say it's a poetic way of describing reliable patterns. A few suggest that what's often dismissed as folklore might actually be a more holistic science, one that integrates environment, pattern, and cultural intuition into something Western systems can't fully translate. But on this canoe, there's no argument. Kaulani sees the cloud. He nods. That's enough. You notice more cues now. The air is thicker, damper. There's a taste of vegetation in the wind, faint but certain, like standing just outside someone's open kitchen door. It smells like soil, like ferns, like something alive that isn't floating. And then there's the way the waves change. They don't crash, not yet, but their shape shifts. Swells once long and steady become shorter, more vertical. They're reflecting off something, bouncing back. That something, shoreline. Kaulani shows you how to listen for this. He crouches low, knocks on the canoe's hull, then holds still. A moment later, a faint echo answers barely a bump. Rebound wave, he says, from cliffs. You're not just hearing the sea anymore, you're hearing what it's bounced off of. Let that sink in. This isn't sonar. This is bone and ear and wood and water, working together like a symphony. You sit still, soaking in the sounds. A bird caws overhead. Not one of the fast-swooping sea-hunting birds from earlier, but something lazier, less stressed. A forest bird, a land bird. You're starting to believe the island is calling you in. Kaulani sings something now low and slow, like a lullaby. You can't make out the words, but the tune folds itself into the ocean's rhythm. You realize it's a chant of arrival, a kind of musical handshake with the land ahead. You don't just show up, you introduce yourself, you enter with respect. Your fringe tidbit for the night? In some traditions, new islands weren't even considered discovered until the navigator had dreamed about them. If they didn't appear in a vision or chant, they weren't claimed. Presence alone didn't equal arrival. Recognition did. Now land reveals itself, not just as a green smear on the horizon, but as peaks, cliffs, the silhouette of trees. The island is no longer a rumor, it's a body. Kaulani points. We land near the river mouth, he says. The current is slower, easier welcome. You watch as the crew adjusts the sail again. Not hastily, not with excitement, with reverence. You're ending a journey that may have taken weeks. And every step of it was guided not by machines or math, but by the humble, consistent observations of clouds, wind, and waves. You're not crashing onto a beach, you're gliding into the embrace of something that's been waiting, and somehow you feel like it knows. You don't remember the exact moment the island stopped being a blur and became a place. One breath, it was a distant idea. The next, it had trees, hills, shorebirds spiraling upward from its cliffs like ribbons. You blink and now it's real, lush and vivid and impossibly close. But Kaulani still isn't heading straight in. Not yet, he says. We circle first. Today you learn that arrival isn't about landing, it's about reading the welcome. The canoe doesn't aim for the nearest beach. Instead, it follows the shoreline from a distance, tracing the perimeter like a respectful guest, walking the edge of someone's garden before stepping inside. You watch as the crew shifts from navigation to observation eyes, scanning not the horizon but the island itself. And this is where the Marshallese wayfinders enter the story with their famous stick charts. But not in the way you think. Your historical fact: the Marshall Islands produced some of the most advanced and unique navigational aids in Pacific history: stick charts made from coconut fronds, shells, and senet twine. These weren't maps in the Western sense. They were schematic memory aids showing wave patterns, island positions, and current flows. And the twist: you didn't take them on the journey. You memorized them at home and left them behind. Kaulani pulls a small chart from a satchel. It's a teaching model, thin, brittle, about the size of your forearm. Arched sticks form wide curves representing swells. Small cowrie shells mark island positions. He doesn't explain it. He holds it like a holy book, lets you look, then folds it away again. These are not maps, he says. They are reminders. You love that. A map says, go here. A reminder says, remember what you already know. Quirky tidbit: some stick charts had no fixed scale. The distances weren't precise because the ocean isn't. Instead, the relationships mattered. How one current crosses another, how wind bends around an atoll, how long a wave takes to reach your canoe after it bounces off a reef. The chart didn't answer questions. It taught you how to ask them. As the canoe glides along the coast, Kaulani mutters things like, the headland speaks, and this rock remembers the wind. At first you think he's being poetic. Then you realize these are landmark mnemonics. He's recognizing features, rock formations, tree lines, angles of bays that have been used as memory markers for generations. Historians still argue whether these charts represent a navigational language or an entirely different epistemology, a way of knowing rooted in fluid relationships instead of fixed coordinates. Some anthropologists believe the charts are visual poems, encoding knowledge spatially and emotionally. Others argue they're more like musical scores meant to be interpreted by performance. The truth, as usual, is probably somewhere delightfully in between. As you round a shallow bay, Kaulani gestures toward the horizon. That swell, it touches this cove in the same way it touches Tarawa, he says. Same rhythm, same breath. You try to feel it, the pulse of a distant storm echoed in this quiet inlet. A memory made of motion. Then he says something that stays with you for the rest of the trip. When we land, don't look for the welcome. Bring it. You nod, unsure what that means yet, but it sounds important. You finally spot the landing site. It's not a dock or a village, just a gentle beach half-shadowed by palms. The crew begins to slow the canoe with careful paddle strokes, using long, wide arcs to bleed speed from the water without a splash. Everything here is quiet, even arrival. You're not barging in. You're entering a conversation already in progress. The canoe brushes against sand with a whisper, not a thud. No one cheers. No one leaps into the surf. This isn't conquest. It's continuation. You're not here to take. You're here to join. You step off last. Your legs wobble, part awe, part ocean memory. The land feels wrong at first, too solid after so many days of sway. You stand still. The trees don't move. The sand doesn't hum. It's strange, this stillness, and yet comforting. Kaulani doesn't go ashore immediately. He kneels in the shallows, cups a handful of seawater, and lets it trickle down the bow. A gesture, a goodbye, a thank you. That's for her, he says, patting the canoe like an old friend. Today's lesson isn't about movement. It's about what happens next. Your historical fact. In Polynesian culture, arrival wasn't just a physical event, it was a ritual moment. Landfall marked the shift from voyaging to hospitality, from seeking to settling. There were protocols, gestures, chants. You didn't just show up. You acknowledged the land. You asked permission. Some traditions included chants to the ancestors of the island, or gifts placed at the first tree encountered. Others involved pouring fresh water, if available, onto the sand. Not to cleanse it, but to mix it. To blend the new with the known. You and Kaulani walk together up the beach. He's silent, listening maybe. You hear birds louder now, more varied. You smell flowers, real ones, tiare, plumeria, Something spicy and sharp and wild. A smell so full it almost feels like eating. Then you notice it, a stone ring low to the ground near the tree line. A hearth. Kaulani stops. The first fire goes here, he says. Not there, he gestures inland. Here, where the sea can still see it. You're about to light a fire not for warmth or cooking, but for anchoring. That's your quirky tidbit for today in ancient Polynesian landfall practices. The first fire wasn't just practical, it was spiritual. Fire linked the new place to the old. The coals, sometimes carried from the previous island in sealed gourds, were used to ignite the flame of continuity. The journey didn't end with arrival. It ended with relighting. Kaulani pulls out a dry bundle wrapped in tapa cloth. Inside, slivers of wood fibers, even a single glowing ember tucked in a clay bead. From Hilo, he says, still breathing. You watch as he builds the fire, no flint, no match. Just friction, breath, and belief. It catches with a whisper. He shields it from the breeze until the flame stands on its own. Then he backs away. No fanfare, no speech. Just presence. Historians still argue whether the placement of these hearths was symbolic or strategic. Did they face east because of sunrise rituals, or west to honor ancestral lines? Some think it had to do with prevailing winds and safety. Others believe it was about creating a physical and spiritual anchor that tied the land to the navigator's soul. Kaulani leans toward you. Now we're here, he says. We feed it. He drops a piece of dried breadfruit into the fire. The smell rises, a smoky sweetness that makes your stomach growl. You add a strip of coconut bark. It flares briefly, then settles. Around you, the others begin unloading the canoe. Not just supplies, but plants, breadfruit saplings, sugarcane shoots, bundles of taro and Thai root. This isn't camping. This is colonization, but of a different kind. It's not about staking flags. It's about planting futures. You helped carry a cluster of taro. It's still damp, wrapped in palm fronds. Kaulani smiles. This is how we carry home forward, he says. He shows you how to place them in the earth gently with space. Roots need room, he murmurs. You think he might be talking about more than plants. That's the quiet brilliance of it. The Polynesian way of expansion wasn't loud. It wasn't greedy. It was mindful, slow, enduring. Islands were not claimed. They were befriended. By nightfall, the camp is barely a ripple in the landscape. No fences, no fires roaring high. Just one glowing hearth, a few mats, and a silence that feels earned. You lie back on a woven mat and look up. The stars are different here. Not entirely just shifted. New angles, new cues. Kaulani sees your gaze and says, now you learn them from this island. You smile. The journey isn't over. It's just changed shape. The fire is still warm when you wake. Just a circle of coals now glowing faintly tucked into the sand like a heartbeat under a blanket. Someone fed it during the night, not because it was cold, but because it's tradition. The flame must never go out too soon. Kaulani is already up. He's gathering small leaves in a woven basket, humming softly to himself. Around the clearing, others stir. The new day isn't marked by alarm clocks or roosters. It's marked by tasks done without being asked. Today's lesson, hospitality. You're about to learn that navigation didn't end at arrival. It transformed into something sacred, Xenia, the ancient law of welcoming. And while the Greeks might have named it, the Polynesians lived it. Your historical fact in Polynesian culture, hospitality wasn't a nice idea. It was an obligation woven into the spiritual and social fabric. The traveler, the guest, even the potential enemy, all were to be offered shelter, water, and food before any questions were asked. This wasn't kindness. It was cosmic insurance. You never knew who was watching, or who might be a god in disguise. Kaulani hands you a slice of dried banana wrapped in a Thai leaf. It's for a guest. Who, you ask? He points inland toward a path. Someone always comes, and he's right. A few hours later, a stranger appears. Not a dramatic entrance, just the soft crunch of steps and the sight of a man with a bundle slung across his shoulders. His older face weathered his gaze, cautious but open. Kaulani bows, offers the banana without speaking. The man accepts, sits, waits. It's a wordless ritual, ancient and precise. Only once he's eaten does conversation begin. Now for your quirky tidbit, some Polynesian communities practiced a form of gift-wrapping silence. The more honored the guest, the fewer words were spoken at the start. Hospitality wasn't just about food. It was about space, creating a bubble of stillness around the newcomer, giving them time to adjust, settle, and breathe. You notice that even the children stay quiet. They don't swarm the visitor or pester him with questions. They simply bring water, lay down a mat, and carry on with their chores. The gesture is the conversation. Historians still argue whether these hospitality customs were primarily spiritual, meant to please the gods, or social, to ensure peaceful coexistence in tight island communities. Either way, the effect is the same, a culture of inclusion that treats guests not as burdens, but as messengers. Kaulani leans toward you. When you travel far, you carry ghosts, he says. It's good to offer them food, too. It's an odd image, but it sticks. You start to see the fire circle as a table for the living and the invisible. Every ember another seat, every offering a nod to someone you'll never see. The stranger speaks now, his voice rough but steady. He comes from an island west of here. He's heard there's new planting happening. He's brought seeds, sweet yam, a different kind of taro. He says he dreamed of this fire weeks ago. No one laughs. Dreams are how journeys begin. By midday, you've helped dig 2 planting pits. You place the yams, carefully pack them in dark soil, and cover them with palms. New roots, Kaulani says. You wonder how many other fires are burning across the Pacific today. How many other travelers are being welcomed? How many islands are growing out of nothing but memory, patience, and a flame that never fully dies? That night, the stranger sings a song you don't know. Kaulani harmonizes softly. The others hum along. You sit near the edge of the circle, half in light, half in dark. You haven't spoken much today, but you've been heard. The ocean never really leaves you. Even here on solid land, you still feel its rhythms echoing in your knees, your spine, the soft soles of your feet. You walk the forest trails as if the ground might sway at any moment. It doesn't, but your memory does. Kaulani notices your awkward steps and smiles. You still have wave legs, he says. Let the land teach you how to stand again. Today, the lesson isn't about the sea. It's about what comes after the sea, the small rituals of restoration. And believe it or not, one of the most surprising tools of navigation had nothing to do with the sky or water or stars. It was scent. Your historical fact, seasoned Polynesian navigators could detect the smell of land from miles away long before it came into view. The scent of trees, soil, flowers, and even bird droppings would drift out to sea on prevailing winds, offering olfactory confirmation of proximity. In certain weather conditions, this aroma could reach voyagers as far as 30 to 50 kilometers offshore. Kaulani tells you about moani, the wind-borne scent of land. He says, when the air tastes green, you're close. You thought that was poetic until you smelled it yourself. You remember it now, the sharp change from salt and sun to something deeper, loamier, faintly sweet. It reminded you of rain hitting pavement after a dry spell. Earthy, emotional, oddly nostalgic. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some elder navigators reportedly carried different woods or herbs on their person, not for ceremony, but to calibrate their noses. A sprig of wild basil might help them detect the difference between open sea and coastal vegetation. One legend tells of a navigator who could name an island and its dominant tree species just from a passing breeze. Historians still debate whether this was heightened sensory skill ritual or embellished folklore. Some scientists have tried to recreate the phenomenon, releasing aromatic compounds offshore and measuring wind-carried particles. The results were mixed. But here with Kaulani, the evidence is simple. I've smelled Rarotonga from 60 miles, he says. Once I even tasted mango on the wind. You walk with him through the underbrush now, barefoot, careful. Every step presses something green. Ferns unfurl beside your ankles. The air is thick with floral perfume, plumeria tiare, and something sharp and resinous you can't place. It wraps around you like warm breath. Kaulani stops beside a large tree bark, peeling leaves glossy. This, he says, is Milo. Good for canoe building, good for scent, too. He rubs the bark between his fingers, brings it to your nose. It smells like sun-warmed earth and a hint of citrus. You smell that while sailing, he asks. That means a lagoon nearby. You're beginning to realize wayfinding wasn't just direction, it was sensation, a full-bodied awareness. Your nose, like your ears and skin and feet, was part of the compass. Later, you sit by the fire again. The stranger is still there, resting now, his bundle tucked beside him. Kaulani adds greenwood to the flames, and a new aroma rises, piney, smoky, almost sweet. Let the island remember us, he says. Let the wind carry the story. And just like that, you understand something new. Scent isn't just a way to find land. It's a way to leave a trail of memory, a trail of presence. As night falls, the scent thickens. Smoke flowers earth, a language made of molecules. A map for anyone still out there, wondering if land waits for them too. You lean back, inhale slowly, and let the island write itself into your lungs. You won't need a chart to remember this place. You'll carry it in your breath. The canoe sits beached now, its hull resting on a cradle of driftwood and smooth stones. It looks smaller here, less mythic, but no less sacred. Kaulani circles it slowly, checking every lashing, every plank. Not to repair, to remember. She brought us, he says, running a hand along the edge. She gets a rest. Today you finally get the full anatomy lesson, not of a human, but of a voyaging canoe. Your historical fact, the traditional Polynesian voyaging canoe, or waka in Maori and wa'akaulua in Hawaiian, was a double-hulled marvel of design stability and subtle complexity. They weren't just boats. They were floating ecosystems capable of sustaining long journeys across open ocean for weeks at a time, with no metal, no modern adhesives, and no nails. Kaulani begins by showing you the ama, the twin hulls, often carved from breadfruit or koa wood, lashed together with thick braided sennet made from coconut fiber. These hulls aren't symmetrical like a catamaran's. One might be slightly longer or carry more weight depending on wind patterns and the number of crew. Nothing here is mass-produced. Everything is tuned. In between is the iako, the crossbeams. They're flexible, not rigid, designed to absorb the sea's punch without breaking. It's a deliberate softness, an agreement, not a fight. Your quirky tidbit Polynesian lashing techniques were so effective that modern engineers have studied them for earthquake-resistant architecture. The lashings don't hold like bolts, they breathe. They tighten when wet, they flex under strain, they mimic tendons more than scaffolding. And then the sail. You expected something grand billowing, but here it is woven from pandanus, stitched by hand, shaped like a crab claw, small, almost humble, but efficient. This sail remembers wind, Kaulani says. It doesn't chase it, it asks. He teaches you the terminology, not from a book, but through story. The mo'o spine of the canoe runs from stern to bow. The kanau shoulder connects to the sail post. The pakaka mouth is where water is scooped. Everything has a name. Everything has a role. Historians still argue whether these canoes evolved from simple dugouts or were part of a more sophisticated maritime culture stretching back to Southeast Asia. Some point to Austronesian links, Others suggest independent innovation across island groups. The debate isn't settled, but the result's undeniable. You walk the length of the canoe, touching each component as Kalani speaks. The fibers rough against your palm, the hull smooth and sun-warmed, the lashings tight and dark with age. You realize this isn't just a vehicle, it's a body. The canoe has ribs, skin joints, breath. Kalani crouches beside the rudder, a long curved paddle used to steer. You don't force it, he says. You coax it. You listen. You ask what happens if a piece breaks at sea. He shrugs. You fix it, or you learn to sail without it. The canoe teaches you how to lose parts and keep moving. You nod because that doesn't just sound like sailing, that sounds like life. You spend the afternoon helping reinforce some of the lashings, not because they're worn, but because they deserve care. The fibers are soaked in water, then twisted tight, pulling with strength born of repetition. It's hypnotic, almost meditative. Later, Kalani shows you the mo'olelo, the small carvings at the canoe's stern. Not decorative, not random. Each mark records a journey, a name, a storm survived. If the canoe forgets, he says, we forget too. You carve your own mark, just a small notch, a traveler's fingerprint, a quiet thank you. As night settles again and the stars resume their watch, the canoe rests in shadow, its body cool, its spirit full. You lie beside it, hand on its hull. You've walked through cities, you've flown on planes. But this is the first time you've known your vehicle. The air today carries the scent of smoke and salt and something frying in coconut oil. You wake slowly, your limbs pleasantly sore from yesterday's work, reinforcing the canoe. But there's no time to stretch for long. Kalani's voice cuts through the morning haze. We fish today. Fishing, of course. You knew it was coming, but you didn't know it would be this involved. Today's lesson is about survival in motion. Because a navigator isn't just a sailor or a dreamer, they're also a provider. And to cross oceans, you need to eat cleverly, quietly, sustainably. Your historical fact, Polynesian voyagers were expert deep-sea fishermen using sophisticated tools like bone hooks, woven nets, and even live lures to catch a variety of fish while at sea. Their canoes were floating pantries feeding entire crews across hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles. Kalani shows you the Macau fish hooks, carved from pearl shell bone or turtle shell. Some are curved like question marks, others straight like needles. No two are identical. Each one sings a different song, he says. Each one calls a different fish. You learn that the bait isn't always bait. Sometimes it's a decoy like the famous pa kahawai, a gleaming shell lure that mimics a flying fish. It's dragged behind the canoe in the early morning, flashing in the sun, tricking predators like mahi-mahi or aku into chasing it. Quirky tidbit of the day. On longer voyages, some navigators carried trained birds, like noddies or even tamed frigate birds, who would dive when fish were nearby, giving the crew a living fish finder. The bird's excitement, that was your sonar. Kalani hands you a coil of line made from braided Olona fiber, springy, almost silky. Try, he says. You thread the hook, knot it twice, and toss the line into the shallows. It sinks fast. You wait. You wait longer. Fishing, you discover, is part patience, part luck, part language. Kalani doesn't talk while he fishes. He watches, he listens, he feels. His fingers twitch slightly every few seconds. Not nervousness, tension, connection. When his line finally pulls, he doesn't yank. He murmurs, coaxes. A silver glint breaks the surface, a wriggling wrasse already stunned by the hook. He brings it in, thanks it softly, then kills it with a sharp knock against a stone. You are not squeamish, but you are quieted. You catch 2 smaller fish later. Kalani watches you clean them with practiced hands, then nods in approval. You eat what the ocean gives, he says. Never more. never faster than you can think. You ask him what they did during bad stretches when fish vanished or storms made nets impossible. He shrugs. You plan, you share, you go hungry. Historians still argue whether Polynesians relied more on preserved staples like dried fish and taro or hunted continuously while sailing. Some evidence suggests they stockpiled food in hollow bamboo stalks lined with leaves and salt. Others say they relied on real-time fishing and driftwood traps to supplement the journey. In truth, probably both. A system of redundancy built into culture. Back at the camp, the morning's catch is cleaned and grilled over the hearth. You sit on the ground, hands salted from the sea as the scent of sizzling fish mixes with breadfruit roasting in the coals. No one eats first, not Kaulani, not the kids, not even the dogs. First, a sliver of fish is dropped into the fire for the ones who helped. Only then do you eat. The flesh is firm, slightly sweet, kissed by smoke. It tastes like work, like gratitude, like motion that's finally come to rest. And here's the secret no one tells you. The best part of fishing isn't catching the fish. It's realizing that you could. That if the sea demanded it, if the wind shifted, if everything familiar disappeared, you'd still eat, still sail, still move. You've been fed. Now you're ready for what's next. There's something different about today. The air hums with a rhythm you can't quite place, not wind, not waves, but motion. All around you, life moves in patterns that feel choreographed, like someone somewhere is conducting the island. Kaulani takes you down to the water's edge. Today, he says, you watch the ocean think. You expect another lesson in reading swells. But what you get is stranger and more alive. Today's lesson is the language of animals. Your historical fact, Polynesian navigators were keen observers of marine and avian wildlife, often using the behaviors of fish birds and even insects to gauge location weather changes or nearby land. These signs weren't just secondary, they were essential. Kaulani starts with the fish. You kneel beside him in the shallows. Schools of small fish flicker just beneath the surface, moving into tight clusters, then scattering with a sudden twitch. Watch them, he says. They feel currents before we do. You notice the darting pattern south to north, always hugging the rocks, never venturing too far out. Storm on the east side, Kaulani says, without looking up. Big one, they're staying close. You look up. The sky is clear, but he nods at the horizon. By sundown, you'll see. Then he turns your gaze upward. Birds again. Not the seabirds this time. These are smaller. Land birds. Finches, doves, even a parrot or two in distant branches. Kaulani points out their flight paths zigzagging inland, never venturing over the beach. They don't like pressure drops, he says. They feel what we ignore. Here's your quirky tidbit in some island traditions. Fishermen used the position of goats on cliffs to predict tides. If the goats descended early, the fish would feed inshore. If they stayed high, the current was wrong. A fisherman once told Kaulani, the goats are never wrong. They don't have the ego for it. You laugh, but you also take another look at the landscape. Now it feels full of signals. A lizard rustles under a leaf heading away from the beach. A spider tightens its web. A heron lands but keeps its wings half open. All of it is a message. All of it is readable. Historians still argue whether this was true pattern recognition or cognitive bias. Were the Polynesians really that tuned in, or were they simply masters of constructing meaning from randomness? Kaulani doesn't bother with that question. It works, he says. You don't need to explain the drumbeat to dance to it. In the afternoon, you wade into the lagoon with a net made from braided hibiscus fiber. Kaulani tells you to stop halfway. There, he says, watch the shadows. You see nothing, then movement, a flash, a swirl. A silver shape dances between the mangrove roots, then vanishes. That's ama, he says. Mullet. If they school tight, you can throw. If they break early, you wait. You wait. The mullet gather again. You throw. You catch two. You return to shore soaked and smiling. Not because of the catch, but because you felt for a moment part of it. That night the fire burns low and Kaulani tells you one last story about his great-grandfather, who once predicted an island's proximity by the way a crab walked sideways. No joke. The crab avoided wet sand, which meant a reef nearby, which meant land nearby. He laughs, then shrugs. Maybe it was a coincidence, maybe. Or maybe the crab was just the last voice in a chorus. You're only now learning how to hear. You lie back, letting the stars peek through the leaves. The island sings and clicks and chirps and rustling wings. It isn't silence, it's symphony. And you're finally hearing the opening bars. It starts with a song. Not yours, someone else's. Soft, rhythmic rising with the dawn like mist. You sit up on your mat, blink into the golden haze, and see a line of people gathering near the canoe. They wear garlands of green and white leaves and flowers woven with practiced hands, and each holds a paddle upright like a staff. Kaulani is already there. He meets your gaze, smiles, and nods. Today, he says, we remember. You're about to witness something that feels ancient, but also surprisingly new, the rebirth of a forgotten way. Your historical fact: in 1976, the voyaging canoe Hokulea was launched in Hawaii as a modern reconstruction of traditional Polynesian navigation techniques without compass, GPS, or maps. Led by master navigator Mau Piailug of Sarawal, the journey from Hawaii to Tahiti proved definitively that Polynesians had intentionally navigated vast distances in pre-modern times. It silenced skeptics, and it ignited a movement. Kaulani tells you, we sail not just to arrive, we sail to prove. The paddlers are preparing to retrace a short leg of a traditional route, not because they need to, but because it teaches. There's a new apprentice in the group. She can't be more than 17. Her eyes scan the water like it's a riddle she wants to solve. You see a bit of yourself in her. You help carry a bundle of supplies to the canoe. Taro breadfruit flasks of water, a small sealed gourd with glowing embers. Not a long voyage. Maybe one night, too. But every journey matters, especially now. Kaulani shows you the navigator's seat, a low bench. No backrest placed at the stern. From here, the stars will be tracked. The swells felt the sky translated. You notice carvings along its side names, voyages, even storm symbols. It's like a resume in wood. Here's your quirky tidbit. Hokulea's initial launch was controversial. Some in the academic community doubted its purpose, while others feared it romanticized the past. But after successfully reaching Tahiti using only traditional methods, the canoe and the culture it represented became a global symbol. Its name means Star of Gladness. Its mission: revival through doing. As the younger sailors begin loading the hulls, Kaulani turns reflective. Before Hokulea, many of us thought this knowledge was gone, but it wasn't. It was just sleeping. You ask about Mau Piailug. Kaulani's tone shifts, gentle, reverent. He gave us the path back. Even though it wasn't his homeland, he said yes. He taught us what our own islands forgot. Historians still argue whether Mau was the last of a dying tradition or the first of its rebirth. But here on this beach, surrounded by future wayfinders, it's clear he was both. You sit near the fire with the younger apprentice as she ties her hair back. She's nervous. What if I forget the stars, she asks you. You smile, then listen to the waves. She nods, inhales deep, and steps aboard. The canoe is pushed into the surf with a practiced heave. It rises, bobs, steadies, sails unfurl, paddles dip. The wind catches, they glide forward, not fast, but certain, like something old remembering how to move. Kaulani watches from the shore. You ask if he ever doubts. He shakes his head. No, because every time someone learns, the ocean remembers them. It will never forget us if we keep speaking its language. You both stand in silence, watching the canoe shrink into the horizon. You don't feel loss. You feel continuity, because someone else is steering now, and the stars are still watching. The wind changes. You don't hear it, you feel it. A slight shift against your cheek. The leaves tremble differently. The ocean's voice, once hushed, deepens. Kaulani stands still as narrowed toward the horizon. Time to talk about storms, he says quietly. The sea never gives without asking. You've had clear skies, calm waters, fragrant breezes. But voyaging isn't always that kind. Sometimes the ocean tests you not with malice, but with momentum. And today's lesson is about navigating when things don't go as planned. Your historical fact: Polynesian navigators were not only masters of reading natural cues in good weather, they were also highly skilled in reading pre-storm conditions and adjusting routes to avoid or endure rough seas. Long before barometers or satellite weather models, they watched clouds stack, winds stall, fish dive, and animals go silent. These were their forecasts. Kaulani shows you the signs. You'd think a storm would announce itself with big theatrics, thunder, black clouds, waves like movie monsters. But the first signs are quiet. The clouds are lower today, flatter. They layer like rice paper, thin but heavy. The breeze has a thickness to it, like it's thinking hard. Birds fly closer to the treetops. Even the insects seem subdued. Kaulani kneels beside a pool of water. Watch the surface, he says. The reflection is blurry, almost wobbly, even though there's no wind. Air pressure, he mutters. The island breathes slower before it gets wet. Then he begins reinforcing the shelter, not with panic, but with purpose. Lashings are tightened. Palm fronds are stacked to shed water. The canoe is shifted further inland and angled just so its nose faces into the wind. Let it resist less, he says. Even strong trees bend. You ask what happens at sea when you can't outrun the weather. Kaulani's answer is simple. You adjust. You wait. You endure. He shows you a technique called He Nalu, Ika Makani, riding the wind in submission. It's not about fighting the storm. It's about letting it happen while managing the damage. Sails are dropped. Weight is shifted. Hulls are angled to ride the trough, not the crest. The canoe becomes a cradle, not a spear. Your quirky tidbit. Some navigators had specific chants for storms recitations that helped them stay calm, keep count of wave intervals, or even lull frightened crew members. One chant, Kaulani tells you, ends with Ehoi loka, na'au elanaka mano. Let the gut rest, let the mind float. You whisper it under your breath now, just to feel it. Historians still argue whether Polynesian canoes were truly seaworthy in rough weather. Some early European accounts claimed they were flimsy or prone to capsizing. But archaeological evidence, as well as the record of modern revival voyages, tells another story. These vessels, when properly sailed, survive, not always comfortably, but persistently. By late afternoon, the sky dims to a dusty gray. The first raindrops arrive not as splashes, but as questions. The kind of rain that tests your patience before your shelter. Kaulani lights a low fire, feeds it slow-burning wood, and places a pot over it. Inside, breadfruit and sweet potato thick with coconut cream. Warm food calms bad wind, he says. You believe him. You all eat quietly while the rain gathers muscle. It drums on the roof. It beads on your arms. The wind hums like a distant animal. But no one is scared, because everything here was built for this. And that's what the storm teaches. Preparation isn't paranoia, it's respect. You fall asleep to the sound of wind in trees and water hitting water, safe in a world that has survived worse. Because this isn't your first storm, and it won't be your last. The storm passes like a guest who didn't overstay. Not loud, Not violent, just long enough to remind you who's really in charge out here. In the morning, everything is washed clean, the leaves drip, the sky stretches wide again, and the fire somehow still smolders, tended all night by someone you never saw. Kaulani is sitting near the hearth with a woman you haven't met before. She's older, her silver hair tied back with woven bark string, her hands busy grinding something in a stone mortar. "You're late," she says without looking up. Kaulani grins. She's always late, he tells you. She's a healer, a kahuna la'au lapa'au, a practitioner of traditional plant medicine. But more than that, she's something rarer, a star woman. Today's lesson isn't from the sea or sky. It's from the quiet strength of the women who helped hold this knowledge together when the waves tried to take it away. Your historical fact. Though traditional navigation roles in Polynesian culture were often male-dominated, women played essential and sometimes overlooked roles as teachers, knowledge bearers, spiritual guides, and keepers of ancestral chants and astronomical lore. They remembered what the sea forgot. Kaulani's aunt, she insists you call her auntie, asks you a question mid-grind. What direction does the full moon rise? You hesitate. She doesn't wait. East, always. And do you know how we track it? Not with stars, with bodies. She stands, leads you to a line of carved stones near the water. These, she says, are hips, shoulders, a spine. You blink. This is our calendar. This is her compass. She teaches you how lunar cycles were once read from the position of moonlight passing through the stones, how women would chant the phase while tending gardens, harvesting taro, delivering children. The body wasn't just a metaphor, it was the vessel of knowledge. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some oral traditions speak of women who could predict ocean weather, not from swells or birds, but from dreams. One legend tells of a navigator's sister who dreamed of a wave shaped like a hand. 4 fingers meant 4 days of calm. The crew laughed. 4 days later, the storm came. Historians still argue how much navigational knowledge was preserved through women in the wake of colonization. In some islands, missionaries banned chants, forbade rituals, separated roles. Yet across Polynesia, women were often the final link, the last echo of memory passed in kitchens and gardens and late-night whisperings beneath woven roofs. Auntie hands you a warm bowl of tea. It's thick, earthy, laced with hibiscus and something peppery. For clarity, she says, you're learning too much too fast. Let it settle. Kaulani sits beside her, respectful, quiet. This is her lesson now. You want to steer a canoe, she asks. Fine. But don't forget the hand that taught you where to place the stars. Later, she sings a chant as she weaves a fresh lay. It's not a song of navigation or weather. It's a name song, a poem of lineage. You understand only pieces, but the melody sticks. It curls inside your chest like a lullaby that's somehow already yours. That night, she walks you back to your mat. The stars overhead feel sharper, somehow more inhabited. You think it's just fire and wind and stars, she says. But you forgot the one who lights the fire, who braids the leaves, who whispers the names of the stars to the babies. She squeezes your hand once, firm and kind. Don't forget her, she says. You won't. Not now. The sun rises differently today. Slow gold spilled, stretching across the water like it's trying to wake something old. You step out of the shelter and find Kaulani already waiting, seated, cross-legged on the sand, eyes on the sea. He doesn't speak. You sit beside him and still no words. Then quietly, we're close to what you want to ask, but you don't. You already know the answer. Landfall. Not the dramatic kind with cheering crowds or flaring horns. This is Polynesian landfall, the gentle anticipatory moment just before sight becomes proof. Today, the lesson is about reading the pre-land. That is all the subtle signs that tell you you're near, even if your eyes haven't caught up yet. Your historical fact-skilled wayfinders knew how to detect land days before it appeared on the horizon. Through cloud formations, wave reflections, bird behavior, scent trails, and even watercolor, they could estimate the distance and direction of an island before it ever showed itself. Kalani hands you a bowl of water drawn fresh from the ocean. It looks clear, ordinary. Then he drops in a small piece of bark float test. The bark spins gently, then drifts inland. Land wind, he murmurs. From a big island. It turns the skin of the sea. You taste it. Slightly less salty. The dilution from freshwater runoff. Maybe it's subtle, but enough. Your tongue has become a tool now. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some voyagers trained their dogs to bark when land was near, not by scent or sight, but by the change in air pressure. It's said one navigator could tell how far from shore they were by how long his dog held its nose in the air. You don't have a dog, but Kalani points upward. See that bird? It's a tern. It flies in a low arc, disappears, then returns. Back and forth, always in the same direction. Feeding pattern, he says. Close nest. You remember birds go farther in the morning to feed, closer in the evening to return. This one's cutting short loops. You're close. The wind smells different again today. Heavier, more plant, more earth. You taste mango, maybe guava. The trees aren't visible yet, but their breath is reaching you. You close your eyes and listen. The ocean's rhythm has shifted. The swell is shorter, more vertical. The canoe, you returned to it this morning to help prepare for the short crossing rocks differently. It's the underwater reflection from a nearby island's reef waves, bouncing back, interfering gently with the long ocean swell. Kalani tests the wave patterns by feel, knees bent, eyes closed. We're within the halo, he says. You ask what that means. He smiles. Every island has a breath, a reach. You're in it now. Historians still argue about this concept of island halo, whether it's quantifiable or mostly myth. Some oceanographers have mapped underwater sound and current shifts that seem to support it. Others call it wishful thinking. But on this canoe, where stars and scent and birds have proven themselves again and again, it's real enough. Later, you help load the canoe for one last journey, just a short sail, to the island you've been sensing all day. The crew moves silently, not out of solemnity but respect. The island is close, and so is introduction. Kaulani says we land like a whisper, not a trumpet. You carry the fire again, tucked in its gourd, still alive, from the first island. It hasn't gone out once. Neither have you. As the sun leans west and the air thickens with the perfume of unseen trees, the island reveals itself at last. Low, green, ringed in coral light. No applause, no tears. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing. You didn't find the island, you followed it. You step onto the shore without ceremony. The sand is warm, packed beneath your feet, finer than the last islands. It smells of salt pandanus and something else perhaps, wild ginger blooming unseen. Behind you, the canoe rests in the shallows, tethered by nothing but trust. Kaulani exhales like someone returning to a room that still remembers him. We don't just arrive, he says. We greet. Today's lesson is the arrival protocol, not the docking, not the anchoring, but the first moments of contact between voyagers and land. And land in the Polynesian worldview is not passive. It listens, it watches. You don't just use it, you introduce yourself. Your historical fact. In traditional Polynesian navigation, the moment of landfall involved specific protocols, offerings, chants, and gestures to honor the place and the ancestors who once landed there. Even uninhabited islands were considered inhabited by spirit. You didn't claim land, you acknowledged it. Kaulani leads you a few paces up from the water where a line of stones runs half buried along the edge of the forest. Not a wall, a threshold. This is the Kuahu, he whispers. The altar of entry. He kneels, unwraps a small bundle. From his pack, inside a dried flower, a piece of coral, a pinch of earth from the last island. He arranges them carefully at the base of the stones, then bows. Now we belong here. You follow suit, offering a shell you carried from day one. As you place it on the altar, you feel something shift, not outside, but inside. A stillness, a shared understanding the island accepts. Here's your quirky tidbit in some Polynesian traditions. Voyagers would press their forehead to the first tree they encountered, offering a breath as an introduction. If the tree rustled or dropped a leaf, it was seen as a reply. A conversation had begun. Kalani touches the nearest trunk banyan, broad and ancient. It sways slightly. She says, "Welcome," he says with a grin. You move inland together, slowly watching the landscape unfold. No one runs. There's no foraging, no exploring. First, you observe. Every part of the terrain is read like a message. Which trees dominate, how the wind moves through the valley, the sound of birdsong. If the call is unfamiliar or absent, the area may be sacred or dangerous. Land tells you how to live on it, Kaulani says, but only if you stop telling it what to be. You arrive at a freshwater spring hidden behind basalt boulders. It bubbles softly, cold and clear. Kaulani steps back, gestures for you to go first. You kneel, cup water in your hands, and drink. It tastes alive. And that's when you understand this island isn't the end of a journey. It's the beginning of a new one. Historians still debate whether these protocols were uniformly practiced across the Pacific or varied from island group to island group. Some believe they were symbolic, a kind of performance to assert presence. Others argue they were pragmatic, offering a way to establish sustainable coexistence with the land from day one. Either way, the respect they cultivated is undeniable. Back at camp, you help build the first shelter, not a house, but a shade structure near the canoe. The roof is lashed from coconut palm. The posts are sunk with softened stone. It's temporary, but intentional. You light the fire again this time, with wood from the new island, carefully dried and stacked. The spark catches, the flame rises, you feed it a sliver of breadfruit. A child from the crew brings over a bundle of Thai leaves. She wraps one around your wrist. "So the forest knows you," she says. As night falls, Kaulani speaks the names of every person present, slowly, clearly into the dark. Not a roll call, a declaration. The stars blink above unfamiliar yet familiar new angles, same truths. You've landed, you've greeted. You've been greeted in return. And now the land begins to teach. By sunrise, things are already growing. You step out from the sleeping mat and see Kaulani kneeling by a small patch of soil, pressing a taro shoot gently into the ground. Nearby, others are planting banana saplings, sweet potato slips, and rows of sugarcane, carefully spaced, spoken to softly. This isn't farming, it's settling. Today's lesson is about turning a landfall into a home, not with conquest, not with speed, but with patience, with dirt under your nails and memory in your hands. Your historical fact: Polynesian settlers didn't just arrive and survive, they thrived. On every new island, they brought key plants and animals critical for building sustainable communities. These canoe plants, breadfruit, taro, coconut, bananas, and more formed the ecological foundation for long-term life in remote island chains. Kaulani gestures for you to join him. He hands you a young kalo plant, taro, sacred and hardy. "This is family," he says. You treat it like one. You place it gently into the soil. He corrects your angle. "Leaves face east," he says, "to wake with the sun." Even planting has orientation here. He tells you how the early voyagers chose which islands to settle, not just by size or soil, but by the sound of the wind in the valley, the depth of the reef, the movement of clouds over inland ridges. Islands weren't just land masses, they were personalities. Some were generous, others less so. Listen to what it wants to grow, Kaulani says, not what you want to grow. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Polynesian planters chewed pieces of root or leaf and spit them into the soil as a kind of communion, literally blending their body with the earth. They believed the plants would recognize their scent and grow stronger for it. You try it, it feels strange. Then sacred. Historians still argue whether the success of early settlements was due to botanical luck or careful environmental management. Some point to how quickly forests were reshaped and water systems rerouted. Others highlight the failures, places where overuse or poor timing led to collapse. But across most of Polynesia, what emerges is a pattern of intentional, sensitive cultivation. By midday, you've helped dig irrigation grooves using half a coconut shell. The work is slow but rhythmic. The water moves cleanly, a trickle at first, then a flow, then a promise. Kaulani calls it Ka-wai-ola, the water of life. That afternoon, he takes you inland where the crew has begun to build hail-pili, grass-thatched homes designed to breathe with the wind. Each pole is placed with ceremony, each lash tied in a specific rhythm. Even our houses know where they are, he says. You help raise the first corner post. It doesn't feel like construction, it feels like choreography. Later around the fire, someone roasts breadfruit in the embers. The skin blackens, peels away, revealing soft yellow flesh. Kaulani tears it with his hands and shares it without a word. No plates, no tools, just fingers and trust. You eat. It tastes like the island knows your name. That night, you walk to the beach alone. The stars are loud again, scattered in new patterns, half familiar. You trace the path of the canoe in your memory, each swell, each wind, each scent. And now, here you are. Not a visitor, a student of the soil. A voice in the new garden. The ocean sighs behind you, not jealous, not angry, just waiting, because eventually you'll go again. But for now, you learn to stay. The morning begins with smoke. Not thick or threatening, just a thin, spiraling trail, curling from the central hearth, rising through the still air like a slow-spoken word. You watch it as you stir mashed taro, the rhythm of your hands, matching the hush of the fire. Kaulani approaches, holding a bowl of water sprinkled with flower petals. Today, he says, you learn why we sail. You blink, confused. You thought you'd already learned that. But today's lesson isn't about direction, it's about meaning. Because for all the star compasses and stick charts and fishing lines and chants, there's something deeper at the heart of it all. Navigation is sacred, your historical fact. In many Polynesian cultures, wayfinding wasn't simply a utilitarian practice. It was a spiritual vocation passed down through initiation, meditation, fasting, and ceremony. The navigator didn't just know the path. The navigator became the path. Their mind was the compass, their breath part of the wind, their heart tied to the flame. Kaulani leads you to a circle of stones inland overgrown with moss and vines. This is the Malama Aina, he says, the place where you remember the sea without the sea. It's a land-based training site used to teach apprentice navigators during storm seasons or while canoes were being built. Here they practiced mentally sailing imaginary journeys, standing barefoot in the middle of the circle, reciting star positions, wave patterns, wind shifts, and chants, all from memory. He gestures for you to stand in the center. You do? Close your eyes, he says. Now tell me, where is north? You think. You hesitate. Then softly, where the stars danced last night. Kaulani grins. Your beginning? Here's your quirky tidbit. Some navigators were trained to enter trance states not to lose control, but to amplify memory. These weren't drug-induced or mystical trances, but deep meditative focus. The brain slowed, the breath deepened. The stars appeared inside. Historians still debate whether these practices qualify as proto-religious rites or practical neurotraining. were navigators, shamans, scientists. Both some researchers point to the startling overlap between wayfinding rituals and known techniques for memory palace construction. Others say the distinction doesn't matter. What matters is the outcome arrival. Back at camp, Auntie prepares a ritual meal. It's not for sustenance, it's for grounding. The food is simple roasted breadfruit, salt-crusted fish, sweet taro pudding wrapped in tea leaves. She places each on a woven mat and invites everyone to sit in a circle cross-legged facing the fire. This is our offering, she says, not to gods, to truth. You eat slowly, no one speaks. The fire cracks, the ocean rumbles just beyond the trees. Afterward, Kaulani draws a small symbol in the ash, a spiral. This, he says, is what the voyage is. Not a straight line, not a triangle, a spiral, out and back, out again. Each time deeper, each time more whole. You touch the spiral, the ash sticks to your fingers, you carry it with you. That night, Kaulani sings alone by the fire. The chant is low, melodic, ancient. You don't understand the words, but you feel the meaning that voyaging isn't about reaching far places, it's about returning rightly. And that's the secret. The navigator's real role isn't to find new islands, it's to carry old light forward. The day begins with silence, not the kind that feels empty, but the kind that feels full. Everyone moves softly, deliberately. There's no rush, no banging of tools, no idle chatter. Even the wind seems to hush itself as it moves through the banana leaves. Kaulani walks slowly through camp holding something in both hands. It's a bundle of old tapa cloth tied carefully smudged with ash and time. This, he says, is what they tried to erase. Today's lesson is heavier. It's about loss. Because for all the beauty and brilliance of Polynesian navigation, there came a time when the canoes stopped sailing, the chants went quiet, and the stars were no longer taught. Your historical fact. With the arrival of European colonizers, missionaries, and foreign governments throughout the Pacific in the 18th and 19th centuries, many traditional practices, including navigation, were suppressed, banned, or allowed to fade. Canoes were burned. Rituals were forbidden. Knowledge that had survived millennia began to vanish in a matter of decades. Kaulani unwraps the cloth. Inside a carved wooden paddle, its shaft worn smooth, its blade etched with symbols. Not decorative, instructional. A mnemonic paddle, a tool for teaching wayfinding chants. Generations once learned from this. This was my great-grandfather's, Kaulani says. He buried it during the American occupation, said the soldiers laughed at it, called it a toy. You run your fingers along the wood. The grooves feel like sentences interrupted mid-thought. Here's your quirky tidbit. During colonial suppression, some navigators encoded their knowledge into hymns, Christian songs that secretly preserved star names, wind patterns, and island coordinates beneath layers of translated metaphor. A church choir, it turns out, could be a classroom. Historians still argue whether this cultural silencing was intentional assimilation or a side effect of economic, political, and religious restructuring. Some say it was a necessary modernization. Others call it cultural erasure. On this island, among these people, it feels like mourning, but not despair. Kaulani points to the canoe. She sailed again. You spend the afternoon helping to repair the iako, one of the crossbeams connecting the twin hulls. You use old methods, no nails, no glue, just cordage, tension, and time. Auntie watches closely. Lash like you're remembering someone, she says, and you do. You think about all the knowledge that didn't make it, the chants forgotten, the maps never drawn, the children told their ancestors were savages. You think about the silence that follows a lost language, but then you think about this canoe, this chant, this meal you're about to share. They tried to silence the ocean, but the tide came back. That evening, you help Kaulani plant a young breadfruit tree near the hearth. He wraps a strip of the tapa cloth around its trunk. For them, he says, you ask him how much of the old knowledge is truly gone. He considers. Enough to grieve, he says, but not enough to quit. As night falls, you sit by the fire with the others. Auntie sings a lullaby that sounds like stars falling into the sea. You don't know all the words, but the melody sticks. You hum along, quietly, so the ghosts can hear you. Dawn breaks differently this time. Not because of the color, though the sky is streaked with soft coral and pale gold, but because of what it feels like. The air hums with anticipation, like the island itself is holding its breath. Kaulani meets you by the canoe. Today, he says, we honor the ones who never stopped. You've learned about storms and stars, birds and breadfruit. But today's lesson is about something even more fragile and far more powerful. Memory kept alive by human will. Your historical fact: after colonization, traditional navigation nearly vanished across most of Polynesia. But in a few remote pockets, especially in the Micronesian island of Satawal, the knowledge endured, passed through generations, orally never written down. The keepers of this flame were men like Mau Piailug, a master navigator who broke protocol and taught outside his lineage to prevent total loss. He helped birth a renaissance. Kaulani begins to tell you Mau's story as you walk along the beach, barefoot morning sand cool beneath your feet. Mau was from a tiny atoll most maps forgot. He was taught in the old way, by immersion, by pain, by silence. He memorized star paths, practiced wave sensing, and sailed blindfolded to learn trust. He was the last of his line to know it all. And when Hokulea was being prepared in Hawaii in the 1970s, an experiment, a hope, a dare, Mau was the one who stepped forward. He trained a new generation of Hawaiians in a knowledge their own islands had long lost. They asked him why he taught strangers. Kaulani says. He said, because no one else asked. That's your quirky tidbit. Mau didn't speak fluent English. His lessons were taught with gestures, wave sounds, sticks drawn in the sand, and long, patient silences. He made students feel the stars rather than memorize names. His method, humility. Historians still debate how much of Mau's knowledge survives. Some say his students captured everything. Others believe large pieces were lost in translation, untranslatable nuance that only lifelong immersion could preserve. But the canoe sailed, and that mattered most. Kaulani leads you to a small grove inland where stones have been arranged in a circle. At the center stands a single upright post, carved with wave motifs. This is for Mau, he says. You sit in the grass and Kaulani chants, not loud, not showy, just enough to make the birds pause, just enough for the air to shift. You think about all the keepers, not just Mau, but every unnamed elder who taught a grandchild who remembered a star's name, when everyone else forgot, who corrected a chant sung slightly wrong, who told a story in a whisper because no one else was listening. The chain didn't break, it frayed, but it held. Back at the canoe, you help repaint the bow earth pigment mixed with coconut oil. The color is deep red. For continuity, Kaulani says. The ocean sees this color. You paint in slow strokes, careful not to rush. Later, Auntie joins you. She carries a small satchel and places it inside the hull. Inside is a shell, a bone hook, and a rolled palm leaf. What's that, you ask? A prayer, she says. Not to the gods, to the ones who didn't forget. That night, Kaulani tells you the stars will shift soon. A new season, a new heading. We'll sail again, he says. You don't ask when, because you know now the when doesn't matter. Only the willingness, and the fire, and the stars that still remember your name. By now, the island feels like a person you've come to know. Patient, quiet, opinionated in the way it shapes the wind and bends the light. You walk through the trees like you're walking through someone's story, careful not to speak too loudly in case you interrupt a thought. Kaulani calls you early. No tools, no sails, no chance. Today, he says, you listen to the future. Wait, that's not what you expected. You've been living in the past, swimming in memory, learning old songs, and tracing the curves of old canoes. But today is about what comes after. Today's lesson is revival, your historical fact. Since the 1970s, a full-scale cultural resurgence has been sweeping through Polynesia, reawakening traditional navigation, canoe-building language, and ceremony. New wayfinders are trained yearly. New canoes are launched. What was nearly lost is now being shouted from every sail. You walk with Kaulani to a clearing near the shore where young apprentices, maybe 12, 13 years old, are lashing together small outriggers. Not ceremonial canoes, practice ones. Light, quick, forgiving. There's laughing, arguing, teasing. It's noisy, joyous, alive. They're not just learning to navigate, Kaulani says. They're learning to belong. You watch as one boy lashes the crossbeam too tight, snaps the cord. Another child tosses him a new one without comment. They don't treat mistakes as failure. They treat them as steps. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some communities, children are taught directionality before they're taught numbers. Instead of 3 steps, they're told walk until the wind shifts from left cheek to right. They navigate through sensation, not symbols. Historians now call this resurgence one of the most successful cultural revivals in the modern world. What once looked like folklore is now curriculum. What was scorned in textbooks is taught in schools. And canoes sail again not because they need to, but because they choose to. Kaulani hands you a roll of woven mat. Inside are tools, a carving chisel, a coil of cordage, a polished shell hook. Your kit, he says, for your canoe. You blink. I'm building one, he grins. You already are. You walk back toward camp with the tools bundled at your side, feeling the weight not of burden but of inheritance, not in bloodline but in willingness. Later that day, Auntie blesses a new hull. It's been carved by a mixed crew, elders, teens, a visiting scholar from New Zealand. They sing the name into the air, Ka Hoku Hamama, the open star. Everyone cheers. Kaulani doesn't cheer. He just closes his eyes. You see, he says. It didn't end. It just paused. You help hoist the canoe upright. It's light, not because of the materials, because of the hope. As the sun sets, the beach is full of firelight and song. You watch the apprentices swap stories with wide gestures, imitating Kaulani's voice, pretending to read stars, mispronouncing things with joy. No one corrects them harshly, because the point is not perfection, it's persistence. And there's one final moment that makes everything real. A young girl, 8, maybe 9, asks if she can draw a new symbol onto the hull. Kaulani kneels beside her. What will it be, he asks. She says, a bird, but made of stars. He nods, she draws. The canoe now has a name, a shape, a future, and a constellation-wrapped bird watching over it. The revival isn't just happening, it's soaring. You wake early before the first bird call and slip out into the cool dark like someone keeping a promise. The fire from last night has collapsed into a red glow, still breathing beneath the ash. You kneel, stir it gently, add a small bundle of dried coconut fiber. It catches right away. The flame rises, and something inside you does too. Today's lesson isn't about sailing or planting or carving or watching birds. It's about you, not because you're the center, but because you're the continuation. Kaulani joins you in silence. He sits cross-legged barefoot, a small cup of tea in one hand. This is the last teaching, he says softly, and it's the hardest. You nod. You're ready, or at least you want to be. He looks out toward the water. You are the canoe. You wait thinking there's more. Some chant, some explanation, but he doesn't say anything else. Because that's it. That's the lesson. You are the canoe. You are the thing that carries the fire across the sea, the one that remembers the names of the stars, the one that bends but doesn't break when the wind speaks too loudly, the one that arrives not to conquer but to ask permission. Your historical fact. In many Pacific traditions, the canoe wasn't just a vessel. It was a living relative. It had a name, a spirit, a lineage. When it was launched, it was blessed like a child. When it returned, it was thanked like a grandfather. And when it died, it was buried, not discarded. Kaulani points to your hands. You've lashed, you've planted, you've watched the birds and sung to the stars. Now the only thing left is to choose. You ask choose what he replies, to carry it forward. And here's your quirky tidbit some navigators would whisper to their canoes before sleeping as if tucking them in. Not superstition relationship. They knew the canoe was listening. They believed it could dream too. You rise and walk alone to the shore. The tide is low. The sand still holds prints from the night before. You trace them backward step by step, then forward again, out and back. A spiral, not a line. The apprentices are stirring now. You hear them laughing, arguing about which star rises first in summer. Someone says the wrong name. No one gets mad, because every wrong answer is a ripple, and every ripple carries the moonlight. Historians still argue whether the revival will last, whether the memory will hold, whether modern distractions will pull it all apart again. Maybe, maybe not. But here in this moment, with a flame at your back and salt on your skin, it's holding, because you are holding it. As the sun begins to rise, Kaulani places something in your hand, a small carved pendant shaped like a wave, cresting into a spiral. This is for when you forget, he says. Just hold it. You'll remember. You close your fingers around it. You will. Because you are not the first. You are not the last. You are the canoe. You are the breath between stars. You are the one who listens to the ocean and hears a homecoming. So now as the embers dim and your breath slows, let's let this journey drift gently to its rest. You're no longer on the water, not really. But you still feel it, don't you? That soft rock of the canoe, the whisper of the wind through the sail, the echo of Kaulani's voice reciting the stars. Maybe you feel it in your fingers. Maybe it's behind your eyes. Maybe it's just a calm that wasn't there before. Let it settle. The canoe is still. The fire is low. Somewhere an island waits not with urgency, but with welcome. Not because you're lost, but because you've always been moving toward it. And if you forget the stars, you'll listen to the birds. If the birds fly silent, you'll feel the waves. If the waves confuse you, you'll wait. Because now you know the path is not always visible. The compass doesn't always glow, but the direction, it lives in you. It was always there, it just needed time. And now you drift not away, but inward, toward a place that's quiet, steady, held, like a canoe resting on velvet black water, under a sky that knows your name. Sleep well, navigator. Your voyage continues tomorrow. End of script. Sweet dreams.